Okay, all right. Well, we're going to get started then. Again, thank you so much for attending the May 2019 Upgrade Q&A webinar. For first-timers, the reason why we have this webinar is so that you could have an opportunity to ask us questions about the most recent enhancements that we had for the May upgrade. We're going to go through some of the highlights that we have for this upgrade. But if you want to review all the new features that we've added, those are available on the May 2019 upgrade release notes on the SmartSimple wiki. Just some housekeeping rules for this webinar. We're going to go through the presentation and some demos in between. If you have any questions about some of the features that you see, kindly write them on the Q&A box or the chat box, and then we'll answer all of them at the end of the presentation. So just some reminders about upcoming SmartSimple events. The first SmartSimple EMEA Summit is happening next week, Thursday and Friday, at the Fitzwilliam Hotel in Dublin. If you happen to be in Dublin, Ireland, or you'd like to just take a trip to Europe and learn some SmartSimple tips and tricks, please feel free to register. Just some reminders about upcoming SmartSimple events. Block Party New York would be September 12th. Block Party San Diego would be October 23rd. Elevate San Diego, our biggest conference of the year, would be October 23rd to the 25th. And Block Party Copenhagen will be on November 15th. We're also going to be attending some trade shows and conferences for June and July. So if you're in Indiana, Minnesota, or New Orleans, these are the conferences that we'll be attending. Make sure to stop by our booth to say hi. We also have upcoming webinars. On May 28th and May 30th, we're going to have a webinar about creating compelling and personalized data matrix. And then on June 18th and June 20th, we're going to have a webinar about security tools that you could do on your own. Register now at smartsimple.com/events. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Sharon Courtney, our in-house technical learning specialist. She's been with us for over 4 years, and you may have met her with your training sessions when you're starting with SmartSimple. Now, without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Sharon.
Thanks so much. All right, so thank you everyone for joining today. And we're going to walk through some upgrades with a few options of demos. And as Claudine mentioned, please do feel free to ask questions either in the Q&A box or the chat. If we can't answer them in this session, we will follow up afterwards as well. So what we're going to be going through today are system upgrades that are applied automatically, as well as ones that are on demand. So, we can can't do them for you ourselves, or you can try them out yourself. As with anyone that I've trained before, you may be familiar with me mentioning it's always worth trying these out on the backup instance first if you're curious about what the impact might be. And of course, you can always review any upgrades on the backup 2 weeks prior to go live if you are on a hosted server. If you're on dedicated, the schedule is a little bit different. So I'm going to go into some of our upgrades now. So for our major updates, the very first one is, of course, we're ending support for the Classic interface. So anyone who's been with us for a longer time knows that we've had 2 interfaces over time, Classic and Arcadia. So officially, as of November 2019, we've ended support for that, for Classic, in favor of the more modern, intuitive, accessible Arcadia interface. So to aid with that, we have added a setting that will render some Classic portal list views and records in the Arcadia interface, and you can try this on backup to test it. But if you do have any questions, please do email support and put transition to Arcadia in the subject line, and they'll be more than happy to go through your own system with that in mind. Next, we have our new personal list view options. So this is really neat. We can personalize the way list views now look and behave. So anyone who's worked as a system administrator, I'm sure some people on the call have done so, you may have constant requests to build new list views, maybe have one column, one with something different, etc. So now you don't have to do that. So I want to demonstrate how that can work. So let's say you're a system administrator, you've created one big list view and you think it's perfect. What the users can now do is personalize it, and they can open it up. So pardon me, here, I've got my standard list view. So what we went through in our last session was how to display this as different kind of image display grids, but this new button here, list view options, so you can see my little sliders. This allows me to select what columns should be visible here. So if I wanted to unselect, say, the status, if that doesn't matter to me, I can do so. And if I wanted to show more smart card indicators, if I wanted to open these records in a modal window, so if I don't want to leave this page, but I just want to open one record, I can do that. I can also define how many records I choose to display per page. Quick note on any of these settings, the system is sticky, as I'm sure you're aware, so whatever setting I have left this in, it will remain until I change it. So even if I log out and log back in, those settings will remain. So this means that as a sysadmin, you are not obligated to make quite as many list views if you don't need to. So hopefully that's something helpful. And next, what we've done is we've brought in some new visual diagrams for the administrators so that you can really easily view and configure your status flow. So anyone who's been at the last upgrade, you may have seen our beta process flow. We had that in our internal configuration settings, but we've now put it out into the actual form so you can see where it is. So this means that I can click configuration mode, open up a submit button, and it will show me the process. So just to show how that can look. So if I went into, say, this record here, and I opened options and configuration mode, so this allows me to make changes to the field settings here. If I navigate over any of these buttons and open it up, what that's going to show me now is what happens when I click this button. So it can show me this is the button, these are the statuses associated with it, and if there are any workflows, you'll see them color-coded here, so I can see this is what happens here. I can edit this button from here, and I can also view the full flow if I'm curious about the entire process flow. So it's pretty fun to go around and definitely worth checking out. You can show more details and you can drill it down per type as well. So if there's specific type processes you need to monitor, you can do that too. So going back to our list, we now have one of my favorite configuration options, which is the ability to drag and drop to reorder fields. So any of you who may have been moving fields around, in the past we had to simply manually change the field order and be aware of the order, change it around. We don't have to do that anymore. So just to show you, let's say I get out of here and I went to my custom fields. And once I open up this list, this option here with the numbered grid, all this used to do was to allow me to enter a starting number and it would increment all the fields by 100. What it does now is enables reorder. So when I click this, I will see at the top I'm in reorder mode, and I have instructions here. I can drag and drop any of these fields around. So for example, if I wanted to move the application name above the application type, I can simply just drag and drop here, as you can see. If I wanted to move multiple fields around, I can hold down the Shift key on my laptop or my system and just select multiple, drag them around. So that means that I can drag around groups of fields. So if I want to move something from one tab to the next, I can do that. And similarly, if all you want to do is re-index everything, clicking this re-index option at the top, you still have your original settings, so that isn't gone. So definitely helpful there, and I would definitely recommend playing around with that. Again, on backup, it seems like replicating the work, but I call it doing your due diligence. As well as that, we have improved our split screen. So if you have used split screen in the past, just to explain what that is, let's go back to our submission manager. So at the top here, we have what's called Enable Split Screen. It keeps a list of records on the left. You can navigate into each individual one on the right. However, we can now show a lot more options here. We can view different level 1 grants. We can navigate to other ones as well if we need to. So we can now review a lot more on our screen if we need to after that. So definitely worth checking that out. The next feature we have is we have improved our annotations. So annotations, back in the past, we would go into annotation mode and you can leave individual comments on individual fields. So let's say you have an applicant who submitted a 95% perfect application. You just need to give them a note to say, hey, reword this just a little bit and we're good. Annotations are going to be very, very helpful. So we have changed how easy it is to toggle on annotation mode. So I'll show you how that looks now. Let's get back into our list here. So disable split screen at the top. If we opened up one of these ones here, let's open this record, you can see now annotation mode, instead of being under options as it used to be, it is now this little pencil in a box icon over here. Once I click this, I will go into annotation mode. The annotations are now visible in yellow. So I can click any field to create an annotation, or I can review any annotations already in place. So here I have one, I can see, all right, maybe I kind of flip-flopped on what the annotations should be here. I can always add more. I can reply or modify the field, or I can go in and edit my own annotations as well. So pretty helpful there. So if I said, you know what, I need to put in more detail, actually add 100 more words. Something like that, or I can delete it if it doesn't work. And with any of these, you can always configure these on with the status. Very, very helpful. So definitely recommended to have a try with that if you have an interest. Next, you administrators may find that we have simplified some ability to pivot reports. So what we can do now is, rather than having to have this as an OData connected Excel document, anything like that, we can now switch between showing a sum, a max, and an average for each type of status on a report. So just to show you what that can look like for anyone who isn't familiar with the reporting options, you can always access them under the main menu, under Tools, and Reports over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up one of our pivoted reports. Here's one I made earlier, and, well, not me. And once I run the report, I can see now at the top I have the option to change between my aggregation columns. So I can pick a max, I can pick an average, or I can return back to my sum. So hopefully that can improve some of your reporting options as you go, but definitely worth looking at as well. Next, we have a new high visibility option for notes. So some of you may have used notes in the past. You can use notes on any record. I do strongly recommend using them for your own knowledge transfer. That being said, if you saw that there were a number of notes on a record, there would be no indication up until now whether some of these were critical, crucial, important, anything like that. So what we can do now is we have a high visibility option for notes. So you can take any existing note type you have and you can switch them to high visibility option. And here's how they look. So if I go back here to my submission manager, and I know, for example, this is one that might have a note on it. A high visibility note will display on the main record as so. So we can see it's got some nice styling to indicate that it's something to look at. If I don't want to see it on the main page, I can click the X to remove it. And to add one of these notes, I would go to my notes option on the left. I can always add another myself. And if I was to select the notification type, in this case, I can say this is now resolved. Save that. And then if I was to return to the main page, maybe reload my frame or return, I can now see it stacks it above it, so it is stacked in date order. I can always return in there, remove my original note, and then of course it will be gone. But definitely worth looking at in the future, I think. So hopefully that we can walk through that if anyone has any questions on it, but please let me know. So moving on, we now also have a new ability to drag and drop reorder portal shortcuts. So some of you may have used portal shortcuts in the past. They're a really nice way to save screen real estate, especially if you have long scrolling lists that people don't necessarily need to scroll through immediately. So just to show you where that might be, to access any roles settings, you can always go into the roles and security option under your configuration settings. Of course, this is for administrators. Under user roles, you'll see all of the roles created and whether they have an active portal. Let's open employee. And under the portal here, I can open up an existing one, shortcuts in this case. And from here, this is where my shortcuts are, this shortcut list on the left. If I wanted to reorder, it's the same process as we saw with the custom fields. So clicking this enable reorder is going to function consistently throughout. So if I said, actually my goals come after my results, if I was feeling a little counterintuitive, I could do that. Or I can put it back to where it was and uncheck disable reorder, and I'm back to normal. So definitely worth looking at there. We've also updated our field naming rules. So that means that you may have seen in the past, we updated our field validation that the field name cannot have spaces or special characters. We've kind of made that a little more flexible to allow for spaces. That means that it also means we can be more backwards compatible. So that means, you know, if you have a consistent naming convention, you don't have to lose that anymore. So hopefully that means configuration is a little bit easier. So definitely worth checking out as well. We've also updated our list view search. So anyone who's been in my training, I'm big on list views, and I'm always big on trying to find ways to search the date better. We can now search date and time. So as an example, if you wanted to check how many applicants are very much last minute users, you want to see how many people submit less than an hour before the deadline time, you can now do that. We've also simplified the configuration of list views. So back in the day, you would have to specify each individual column with an open button in it. You no longer have to do so. You can actually generate these buttons automatically. So just to show you where that is, if I went back to my submission manager here in this case, and I wanted to open list view settings, so for anyone who hasn't done this in the past, we've simplified how to edit these. You select the one that you want to edit. The check mark indicates it's active. The wrench will allow you to open up and edit the list view settings. From here, once I scroll down a little bit, you can now see that there are default buttons available here. So once I select that, that allows me to provide open or quick edit buttons. That being said, if you want to just make it a clickable row, this is already enabled down here with enable row clickable. And of course, if you were concerned about making these changes to a live list view, you can always make a copy as a system or personal list view, test it out, and remove it later if you need to. We've also added an option to limit or restrict the maximum number of file uploads. So of course, when you have some applicants who are very enthusiastic, they may want to give you all the documents, which unfortunately you may not have time to review. So what you can do is you can change the multiple file upload field to have a very specific file max, and you can also combine that with what kind of file you can upload. So just to show you what that can look like, if we open up one of these, and we navigate to our supporting documents here. This is one where we can upload supporting media. If I go to configuration mode, which allows me to open up the settings in this particular field, and we scroll down, we can see the field type is an upload multi-file storage. Scrolling a little further down will allow me to view how many files I can upload. So I can set the max number of files. I can also set a file type restriction. So anyone who may be new to this, quick note, if you wanted to include any of these uploaded files into the PDF of the application, they do need to be in PDF format so that they will be included there. And you can also restrict by file name as well. So definitely worth looking in here. What you may have noticed is there is this little mobile upload that allows you to send a code or QR code to upload to your phone from your phone as well. Moving on to our other minor updates. So we've also increased our list view file download maximum. So I'm not sure if you may or may not be familiar with this setting, but you can allow for downloading all uploaded files to all records in one go. So let's say that you have an applicant bio in all these applications, you want to upload them all, download them all in one zip folder, we can do that. So previously there was a limit to that number, and now there's a mechanism in place to package it up, and it zips all the files, sends you a notification with a link to download these files when you're finished. So really, really helpful there, just to show you where that is. This is a setting you can turn on with any of these. But this is the download files option here. You can see the little zip file. If I say do this without selecting anything, it presumes everything. And what that will do is provide me with the grant fields that are available and the activity as well. So I can bring in everything. I can define my structure as full per record per field, which means that each application will be treated as a folder or holding entity, and then within each it will go through. Then partial, which is per record, or none. If we have one file type, we're putting it all in a single folder. That's perfect. So that's all that that is. Next, we have updated our NEO report builder record set. So NEO is our standard report builder. We still have Classic, but we're moving away from that. So what we've allowed you to do now is to join the user record set to standard and custom field audit record sets. So given that we're bringing in a lot more data categories, data policies, everyone's thinking about GDPR, the California laws, this may be something that's quite helpful. You can see a full user record set of the user that made the field change. One second. We've also enhanced our discussion board 2.0. So for anyone who hasn't used it, this is SmartSimple's answer to support forums. It's our answer to Reddit, if you're familiar with that. So you can create threads with questions, you can upvote or downvote answers as they are helpful. I find it's particularly useful for internal staff if you're kind of crowdsourcing ideas for new types, new portals, or you can use it for external users if they have frequently asked questions and you know that you could just pop them in one place. But we've also allowed the ability to upload files, so screenshots, documents, frequently asked questions, all of that good stuff. We have also enhanced the interface for making charts from reports. So all of our reports have the capability to make charts. Back they were a little bit more limited, but we've kind of been giving them some attention now. We have also deprecated Flash type charts. I'm not sure if anyone is using them, but if you do have any questions with those, again, please feel free to reach out to support. And we've also modernized the search files interface, so this will be particularly relevant when it comes to smart folders, just so that it's a little bit more modern. So that's it for the global system upgrades. So those will be applied automatically. You can always go in and review. But now we're going to move into the on-demand system upgrades. So these are ones you can contact us to enable, or if you feel ambitious, and I hope you do, you can always try adding these yourselves. My recommendation is always go to your backup instance and try it there first. If you like it, fantastic. If you don't, no harm done. So let's move into it. So the first one is a really nice one for if you have a lot of grant staff who may need to change their applications quite frequently. We've extended this question set builder. It's a custom field type, so we've allowed it for what we call provider consumer record links. Anyone who isn't familiar with that, the best way to look at it is provider and consumer can be seen as parent and child. They have the same initials. So just, for example, the program manager would provide information to a submission manager which consumes it. So that just means that your end users have the ability to control their question sets without having to contact the sysadmin and say, hey, can you add these extra questions? That's all that is. We've also improved our Stripe integration, so it's way easier to set up and use. We've had a lot of interest in this feature, so it's definitely worth investigating. So we have a default template that allows you to enable it by supplying it in an instruction text. And we've also brought in some element mapping, so that means it simplifies the user experience. It means that the person entering their payment info, they only have to do one step as opposed to 2 steps. So you can also tie in the Stripe payment screen to launch off a status submit button. So that means you don't have to provide a custom link, hope for the best and hope they click it. And lastly, you can also create pending charges. So you're not obligated to only work with what works in the past. You can trigger payments in the future using Stripe. So hopefully that will really bump up your process a little bit. Yeah. We've also updated the configuration of portal sections. So that means that in the past you may have to build multiple list views. Each one would have their own filter assigned, and there wasn't really any way around that. But what we've done now is we've allowed it so that you can select a list view, and then you can pick from any of your filters and just assign it. So that means that it's a lot less work. You may only ever have one list view that you need with different filters. So I'll just show you how that can look. If we go back to our user roles, our portal, so roles and security, user roles, and I'm going to pick my employee again. So from here, if I open my portal and I scroll down a little bit, go into my home, if I opened up a list view here and I scroll down, I can now see it's changed a little bit if some of you have been using this in the past. We used to just have a system list view, which you could open and the settings of and make changes, but now we can pick our list view and whichever filter we may have. So that means then that you have a bit more flexibility there. Hopefully that will make building a little bit easier. So definitely helpful there. Next option we have is we've improved our organization sign-up page. So obviously when you're bringing in an organization full of people, that's a lot of individual registration. So if you knew that there were going to be up to 3 people registering for a particular applying organization, you can allow for, say, specify minimum 1 lead applicant, and then you can include a number of co-applicants as optional. So that means then that, rather than each individual having to log in and possibly slowing down the process, you're all in, you're all done. So that's just one step as a form. So hopefully that's helpful. It's just a setting on your existing sign-up page, so you can always go in and try it out yourself. And the next option is particularly useful if you've ever worked with inventories and you wanted to connect everything that was on the same level to each other. So this is another ability for provider consumer records. This allows you to specify a relationship between level ones in the same tracking application. So that means, for example, if you need to combine products or combine grant elements or anything like that, this is how you can do that. So hopefully something that might be of use if you have had to struggle with that in the past, maybe thinking about what's on what level, this can take care of a lot of that. Moving on, our minor updates, this one sounds like a small one, but it actually does have quite a bit of impact. We've added a currency formatting to the activity standard fields. So it used to be the case where if the user had a personal setting for decimal and thousand separators, it would apply to all numeric fields, which included currency. So now we have it so that currency is just static. It will not be affected by personal user settings. So hopefully that will just make the layout a little bit neater. We've also added an option to disable the CAPTCHA functionality. So that means that if you need to bypass the use of Google's reCAPTCHA, particularly if you reside in a country that cannot communicate with the Google servers, some government policies do prohibit that. We've now allowed for that too. We've also added the option to restrict access to UTA types based on company categories. So that can work both ways. So for example, if you knew that specific application types were only for 501c3 organizations, you can define that prior to getting into it. And the next option I'm so excited about is allowing users to set homepage. So this is one that I actually brought forward as an option. A lot of the time when I was training clients, I noticed that there were people who would never need to go to the homepage. There was always something they needed to get to, but it was several clicks in, so there was a bit of frustration there. So what you can do now is, if there's something that you go to all the time, like let's say my smart cards or my dashboards, and this was always where I needed to go, I can go to my menu again, navigate down to the end and see set as homepage. So that means that whenever I log in, this will be my homepage. When I click the logo to go home, that will still be my homepage, and I can always go back and revert it to wherever I am. So I find that to be especially useful if you only have very defined roles in the system, rather than coming up with another bespoke portal. This is often a very easy solution. We've also extended the email anything feature for UTA level 1 records, so we've kind of just expanded that a little bit. And we've also added a button to edit the association fields on a record. So associations, for anyone who hasn't used them before, is really good for if, say, you have a grant writer who's not a member of any organizations, but maybe doing work on their behalf. So that way you can associate them with multiple organizations, they can do their work, no problem. So we've just added some more buttons to make that a little bit easier. Moving on to some more minor updates. So we've added some options and permissions for the payment scheduler feature. We've included some instruction text. We've also allowed you to define permission for user roles. So now we've made it so that more user roles can edit the status of these activities. And we've added an option to update the payment scheduler feature so that it can perform exact payment amount validation. So you don't need to make as many guesses as you needed to before. So thinking about that, thinking about Stripe, we're really trying to make sure it's easier to put more finances through the system, especially good if you're thinking in terms of activities, post-award, even events. We've also brought up an email message template for an account change notification. So it used to be if you requested a new password, you would get a new password, but now we've added a new option. So just to show you where that is, if I went over to my menu, my global settings, and my security, under password and activation policies and the activation email templates here, I know I'm going quite fast, we now have not just the new user and a request password, we have a password change notification. So just for your extra level of security. And a quick note for anyone who wants to get back into any of these settings, isn't quite sure where it's located. If you're in global settings, you can always use this search for settings, and clicking any of these will take you directly into the settings. Or if you start typing, say, password, you'll get this. You can open it. It brings you right to where you were. So always useful to be aware of that. We've also added a new user permission. So this allows specified user roles the ability to view and update other user system settings. So that means if you're an administrator and you're trying to troubleshoot issues with an individual user, let's say they have some date-time format issues, a system administrator can now update them themselves. So hopefully that's helpful. And next, for anyone who works with multiple organizations, multiple entities, we can now create login pages with different logos. So it used to be that we had one per login page, fair enough, but you can change that dynamically by passing a parameter into the login page URL, and you can specify which logo to use from a smart folder. So if you do have a bunch of logos that are languishing in a folder somewhere, now's the time to shine. Finally, we've added the option for a default focus area on a geomapping field. So you can just, if you know you're always going to be looking at a specific place, that's where you can specify that. So that's it for the on-demand system upgrades. That being said, we do have a significant amount of administrative functions, so anyone who's a super user or learning about the system, it can definitely be helpful to have a read through any of these. And as with any of these, please do feel free to reach out if there are questions, confusion, anything like that. But yeah, that's it for this upgrade.
Thank you for that presentation, Sharon. We do have a few questions that were raised during the presentation. First off, high visibility options for notes. Do you have to turn this feature on?
Yes, I will show you how to do that now. So great question. So the way we would edit any notes is we go to our menu, our global settings, and on the first page under system, we have note types. So if we open that up, we can add as many of these note types as you wish. This one, the naming convention is less relevant than down here we have this new feature called high visibility. So that just means it always shows on the type of the record, and the same permissions will apply as before. So if you wanted to restrict these per specific entities, you can do that. I tend to leave them general. With these, you can also assign workflows to them if there was someone who needed to be notified, and you can include some note options. So if you had statements you would use over and over again, like review this, read and understood, etc., you can put those into the notes options as long as they're delimited by a semicolon.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question that we have, can you show how to set notes as high visibility and how to build a pivot report?
The pivot, well, the high visibility we just did,
okay.
So that's the same process as before. The pivot report, if we go into our reports here, and we open up that particular one, so I'm just going to search pivot. We've got this here, we can edit this report. So under this now, when we go into our editing, we can enable pivot view. So this needs to have exactly 2 columns that use group by functionality. So you need to make sure that when you're building this report that it functions with the group by on certain columns, depending on what you need. So just to show you how this one has been built, open up our report builder. And this one is going to be fairly straightforward, but we have a couple of group bys here. We have the type grouped, the status grouped, and then we have a sum on the amount requested and a max on the amount requested. So you can use the same field over and over with different functionality depending on what you need. But I would say with reports, as I always recommend, give yourself a good bit of time to test this out just so that you can move through it in each way. But yeah, that's all you need to do, so it's under advanced.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Next question that we have, file name restriction, how does this work?
So, good question. This is usually when you might want to say you need to update this with your name and the type it is. So let's open one up and just walk through it. It's not mandatory to have this, by the way. It's just if you have a specific naming convention that you need to keep in the same way. And in general, I would always recommend trying to keep this quite generic. But with this, you would just put in maybe, for example, type, year, etc. I honestly haven't seen a lot of people use this. It's just available if you need it.
Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up the webinar today? Okay, here's another one. Can you please explain what extended email anything functionality is available for level 1?
Okay, yes, I can. So the email anything functionality, if we go back to our submission manager, what that implies is when you're able to email from a list. So this is something I'll actually need to enable here. So if we go into our security and visibility, if you'll pardon me for a moment, I'm just going to enable group email on the grant level. So for anyone who is interested in this is always available. I'm just going to enable this for myself. With any of these, I would always recommend starting with system administrator permissions and obviously extending that out as you go. But when I get back to my submission manager now, I can now see I have a group email option. And right now I'm going to say everything. But with these, you can select specific users associated with these records. It needs to have some users. Go to next. Now I have more default templates available. I have styles. I have unique recipients if I need to bring those in. I can include more attachments. I can CC people, and I can build any of these templates under the email side. So we've really brought that out. We're kind of trying to match it to our email broadcast functionality, which we looked at in the last upgrade as well, where we can have metrics, unsubscribe as well. But we've just kind of made the format a lot cleaner. So definitely worth having a try with any of these. But obviously I find it more reliable to work with automated emails rather than an ad hoc, but that's also available.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. One more question that we have, can the annotations function be enabled for grantee users?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So with annotations, how we configure those is under global settings, you would have annotation types and annotation permissions. So first off, you would have your different types. So you would maybe have one from like staff to applicant, applicant to staff, etc. You can color code them, incidentally, if you're curious. And you can restrict them per area as well. And then when you have those annotation types and those permissions created, so obviously you would need to make sure that those are in place first, you can then have them available on specific levels. So in this case, we only have grants and activities. We can anonymize a creator. So if you don't want to expose the name of a staff reviewer, you can do that. So then you would also make the permissions status specific. So obviously, most of the time you wouldn't really need to worry about it at draft level, but at under review or submitted, yes. So here's where you can set those up, and you can also work with the association as well, so that any users associated don't miss out as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one more round of questions before we wrap up. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I guess we're just going to wrap this up. Again, just a few reminders. EMEA Summit next week, May 23rd to the 24th. Here's a list of upcoming SmartSimple events. Make sure you mark all of them in your calendar. And upcoming trade shows and conference for June and July, we're going to be in Indiana, Minnesota, and New Orleans. So definitely let us know if you're attending. Show up to our booth.
I'll be at Minneapolis, so if anyone wants to come say hi, I'd love to see you.
All right. And some webinars that are upcoming. Creating compelling and personalized data metrics, May 28th and May 30th. Security Tools DIY Edition, June 18th and June 20th. Thank you everyone for attending to today's webinar. If there's anything that we could help you with, please send us an email at support@smartsimple.com. Again, thank you everyone, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks everyone. Take care.